Thank you everyone for joining. This is going to be a Q&A session related to the Global Virtual Design Sprint and the use of Mural and how to approach facilitation of the program. This is, all right, I can't take two because we're recording this, but Mark Tippin is here. And I know him through, actually, Mark, I know you first and foremost through the Luma Institute. I did not know you were affiliated with Mural originally, but I had known about your work in that space with the educational space. But you're also very involved with Mural. You've done a lot of webinars with Jim and some other folks there at Mural. You know the ins and outs of the program very well. And I ask you to come to this presentation to not only for people to get an idea of who you are, but to get some high-level overview on how to basically use Mural for facilitation. Some things that you think would be helpful for people to know, especially if they're coming into this event and they've never done Mural before, but they're acclimating to it in a very quick manner. And then the idea is that after a short presentation of what you've got kind of there, we'll open up for Q&A. I can also show some samples on my end of some things that we're going to be using for the virtual sprint that people can use. And I think between those two dynamics, we should be able to at least fill 20 minutes to half an hour of the hour and then see where things go and kind of maximize your time from there. Feel free, also Mark, feel free as you're kind of going through this, like point out some resources that are at Mural, such as the one you have on your screen about the Guide to Facilitating Remote Workshops, which I would recommend. I've read that and referenced it several times over. But feel free to kind of bring those up when you think it's appropriate.
Okay, wonderful. Great. Well, thanks, Robert. I'm really a huge fan of what you're doing with taking design sprints as a concept and really turning this notion that you have to do it in person on its head and proving that it can be done. Being a part of Mural and Luma, I do walk between these two worlds where a lot of the Luma-based human-centered design workshops are all done in person. People fly from all over to come and have this wonderful, highly concentrated experience, but then at the end of it, they return to their usually highly distributed teams and they have this question. So how do I do all that wonderful goodness, framing the question, interviewing, understanding trends, and how do I just go about problem solving when I'm not in the same room with everyone? So that's where the role I fill at Mural is very satisfying because I get to continue the conversation and leverage all of the new tools that people have in their hands and these methods, either that they've learned through Luma or maybe they've been picking stuff out of Stanford's D School or IDEO or wherever they get it. We're all kind of hybrids and mongrels in the design field. I mean, some of us have multiple degrees and some people came to this organically like I did over 25 years, you know. So, but all of those tools will serve you well. What this book is about is just augmenting what you already may know how to do in a team setting or even in a workshop setting, how to identify the things that will help when you're trying to bridge this online. So the link is there, mural.co/ebook. It's a free download. It's also available Amazon if you're like me, someone that just likes having something tangible to kind of carry around and reference and mark up. You can get one there as well. Without further ado, I'm going to run through some things that I've cobbled out of other presentations we've done that kind of help set the stage and give you a mindset about where we're coming from that I think will be helpful, especially as a facilitator, because your job is not just to participate, it's to actually kind of prepare the party, make sure that everything is ready to go, that when guests arrive, it's very clear what they need to do, and that you keep things moving along so that the dessert doesn't come out before the main course and things follow in natural order. And everything we know about work in general is changing. I think everyone that's participating in this global virtual design sprint is aware that this is just going to be more and more the way work gets done. It's helpful in the research that Jim Callback and I at Mural have done and working with these customers, we've really identified that there are three things that you need to keep an eye on. when you're still focused on trying to get to these target outcomes. So as a facilitator in a workshop, you're really, you know this target outcome, but you need to visit each one of these three things and just give it a little bit of a thought. One is teams and team shape. For the sake of our discussion here, I'm going to assume everyone's highly remote and distributed. So I'm not going to go into the nuances between if you're co-located or if you have a Paris office and a London office and strategies for working doing that. I'm just going to assume we're dealing with teams in this case that are 100% distributed. But we'll take a look a little bit at the tools that are really necessary to build this kind of digital workspace and how to revisit some of the techniques that you might be very comfortable with, but looking at how are they going to play out online. In this case, I think our point here about making digital collaboration a starting point, not an afterthought, it's evident, right? In some cases, people may be trying to do a traditional design sprint and bring remote people in. So if this is a skill that people really are encouraged to develop and continue, they may find that beyond their participation in your program, Robert, that this is something that they want to do. I would encourage you to start with what we're going to talk about today and have that mindset ready, because everyone's remote at some point. Even if you're in a co-located team, you're traveling at some point. You're not all in the office at the same time. And if you've kind of set up and agreed on the tools and how to get things done, that really sets the team up for success. The tools that we've kind of identified fall into these buckets. The obvious one that everyone thinks remote, they think, oh, it's the real-time communication, right? We're huge fans of Zoom, primarily because they degrade very elegantly. Sometimes when you're facilitating, internet connection gets disrupted. Zoom does an excellent job, in my opinion, of doing the best it can to automatically reconnect you to the group. Whereas other tools, if I'm leading the show and I get disconnected, everyone gets booted, and then you've got a real mess. So, but you need to find out whatever that is. Sometimes you can control it and say specify Zoom. Sometimes you have to work with whatever tool's available, but really agree on how that real-time communication is going to happen. I'm going to go counterclockwise. So the next one is about how you're going to communicate asynchronously. And so that may be email or chat, could be Slack, could be some other tool, Microsoft Teams or something, but you need some connective tissue, especially if you're running a workshop. We are fans of opening up a public-facing Slack channel, because leading up to the moment where the event happens, people have all sorts of questions, and they will always have a mobile device with them. So if they have some way to just post a question, it allows you to asynchronously kind of let them queue up and then in your day go and answer questions and handle this communication as you're able, as opposed to always defaulting to a call, which can be very disruptive. So and that also allows you to start having a community talking to each other. So a lot of times, if you're the facilitator, you can offload or joyously wake up one morning and find out that a lot of people's questions have already been more than adequately answered in that asynchronous communication channel. You need some place to share your content. So if you're going to be running these sprints, there are research documents, or there are videos, or there's customer interviews, or there's stuff that you want to share, that you want to give access to. So you just need to decide, what's that going to be? Is it going to be Box, Dropbox, whatever? Tools to stay organized. If it's going to be a shared Google Calendar or Calendly or some way for people to kind of find and set up meetings. Not only that, but when action items happen, how are you going to make it really transparent and visible, and make sure that everyone's really aligned on who's going to be doing what and what the expectations are, so that when in the in-between times, when you're not in plenary, when you're not doing this real-time communication where you can just simply ask the question, you want to make sure that you have some place that's going to make it really clear who's doing what. And that may be in Mural. At Mural, we use Mural quite a bit, but we work with teams all the time that use Asana or Trello or any of those things. Whatever tool you want, just make sure everyone's agreed to use the same tool so everyone knows to look in the same place. It's this last one that really drew me into my role at Mural. And when I was managing a highly distributed team at Autodesk, it's very frustrating that if you weren't in the headquarter location, sometimes you were completely cut out of decision making. And so, that's how I sought out and evaluated tools. And I landed with Mural, and I'm a big fan of it because it's friendly to approach, and in many cases, when you're trying to facilitate a conversation, you're bringing in stakeholders that may or may not be highly technical, and so having an environment that on one end of the spectrum gives you everything you need as a facilitator to really prep that big dinner party, to really set it up and have the tools to completely set the stage, but then for the participants, have kind of easy entry level ways for them to participate is very important. With those 5 things, I think if you agree in advance, that kind of creates your digital workspace. The last thing that I'll touch before I go into demonstrating the product is looking at these techniques. Right, so this is in a design sprint, there are certain ones that work to a certain extent. I know Robert's going to be helping you set up and think about how, for each one of your challenges, how to set up the series of methods and how to break them down by days and how much activity you can do in any particular day. But even beyond the sprinting itself, wanted to kind of raise your awareness, and this may be obvious to many of you, but there is this notion of things that you need to think about before, things that you do during, and then things that you do after. So, for example, in the before section, obviously you need to really clarify these target outcomes and be aligned on that. Make sure that you've touched on the 3 T's, right? The teams, tools, and techniques. This is all stuff you're doing in advance. Looking at the methods and rethinking how these things are going to work, and creating some type of dashboard, one place where people can go and get a sense of the status of things. This could be in Mural. Again, this could be a wiki page or something where you just have links to all the things and shared calendars and all that stuff, but really not having 15 links you need to know, but at least put those 15 links on one place where everyone can just have one thing to remember to get access to all this stuff is very helpful. The last thing is, before you do any of this, practice it at least once. You may think that you'll be able to get through a warm-up exercise in 5 minutes. Well, just try it once, because you may find that actually if you have 8 people, it's going to take 20 minutes and you might need to rethink, do I want to burn that much time right at the front? But you only know that when you actually run through it. During is when you really want to focus on the things that are different when you're in a virtual setting versus when you're in a room. When you're facilitating in a room, it's very easy to read the levels of energy. You can see if someone has this anguished look on their face, maybe they have a question, and you can you just facilitate in a space. And these are skills that we've all developed. And as humans, we've developed. As parents, we've developed it. When you start connecting through camera and VoIP and these virtual spaces, things are a little bit different. So the first thing I want to mention is time boxing is really important. In a workshop, a co-located workshop, it might not be unusual to say, okay, now the next thing we're going to be working on for about 40 minutes is this, and you're going to do kind of A, B, and C and go to it. And then you wander around the room, and if a team is way ahead, you present them with another challenge. If a team is kind of falling behind, you spend a little more time coaching with them. That doesn't work online. If you said go to it in 40 minutes, it'll fizzle out. So you need to time box things really in terms of like 2 minutes, 5 minutes. 8 to 10 minutes is kind of on the outside. And what this means is you may have a method like, we'll just say rose, thorn, bud. So what you may do is, and rose, thorn, bud, for those of you that don't know, is just a way of using colored sticky notes to record observations. In terms of roses, use a pink note. These are positive things, right? So, okay, this experience, this worked pretty well. That's a rose. Negative things you write down on a blue Post-it note. And the green ones are opportunities. But what you wouldn't want to do is just say for 20 minutes, go do RTB, right? What you'd want to do is say, okay, 2 minutes, everyone's going to work silently. I'd like you to create at least 2 roses, 2 thorns, and 2 buds. Okay, now we're going to go into groups and we're going to do an affinity cluster or something. You would break it down. And that allows, there's always going to be some group that, you give them 2 minutes and they're going to need 3. That's fine. But you kind of allow everyone to kind of sync up and come together and stay in lockstep. Leverage multitasking. So it's a fact that people will be interfacing with you virtually through a computer. And if you're running a multi-hour session, guarantee they're going to check email or they're going to be distracted by other things. One way is to actually acknowledge that and give tasks or say, hey, can someone go find an article or an image or a diagram that could help us, and actually leverage the fact that you're connected into all of these vast data stores, and make that part of the way you actually get things accomplished. Think about synchronous and asynchronous work. So the fact that your design sprint is going to take place over several days or weeks, think about how you can make the most use of when people are together, and then set them up for success in the interim times, the times between the working sessions. And remember to digitize and make things visible as you go. And again, that's kind of how I most heavily lean on Mural in my workshops. Is it's a space where all of the artifacts, where all of the thinking is digital. Even if we do something as a small team that happens to be co-located, we still scan those notes or those post-it notes and make them available. After, it's just really important, every time you have one of these together sessions, carve out some space at the end, even if it's only 5 minutes, to kind of back up out of the workshop itself and say, okay, how'd that go? Just like an agile team would do a retrospective, this is your opportunity before you facilitate the next little hunk of the sprint to find out what worked, what didn't work. Couldn't hear you, speak up. Think we covered way too much. Think we need to cover more. Too many rat holes or something. You really need to hear that as a facilitator, and you will garnish a tremendous amount of respect from the people you're facilitating if you actually pivot on a few things and respond to that feedback. It's extremely powerful if you can do that. And it just improves the experience for everyone. Running out the clock and everyone just dropping off and saying goodbye, you really miss an opportunity to bring things together. All right, so that was kind of my, my intro to, how to think about these things transitioning. I wanted to pause and just see, does anyone have any questions at this point before I go into kind of a demo of Mural and show some examples?
Mark, there was one question about the timer in the upper left-hand side in terms of like asking if there's a general timer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with a little bit higher umbrella and let you know that there is a special role that we have built inside Mural, which allows people to be not only like own the mural, like it's mine, I've created it, but you can also assign a role called facilitator. And the facilitator has certain powers, and one of them is you have the ability to actually activate the clock. In fact, I think we're changing that so that you could actually hand this task off to someone else, but I just wanted to let you see it's very simple. There's no magic here. It doesn't do anything other than allow you to type in, if you were going to time box something for 2 minutes, and then you just start the timer, and then this is synchronized, so everyone that's viewing the mural would just see it count down. So that's pretty much all there is. You can, as a facilitator, also, if you notice people are really into it, you don't want to interrupt the flow. And as facilitators, we know sometimes we fib a little bit. We say, all right, 3 minutes, and then 3 minutes go by, and you're like, okay, just another minute. Another 30 seconds, so you're kind of artificially playing with people's sense of pressure and time. So you can kind of do the same thing here and say, I'm just gonna give them another minute because we had a little discussion up front, or that, and then when it goes off, it just says time's up. So they're thinking about adding noises duck quacks or something so everyone hears it. But right
I think
now,
I think an interesting feature would be something like the old Windows 95 when you completed a solitaire. And like the clock would just basically like go all the way down with the trail and bounce off the bottom and go everywhere else.
that's right. Yeah, all your whole mural would just animate crazily. I bet people would love that. Yeah. Probably
Just a thought. And I know I
not.
jumped the gun. I just realized that you were about to go into some of the features that you list there in your facilitators and the basics.
No, that's okay. This was my okay, if it's really quiet, I'll give myself some, some structure to what I'm doing, but I'm happy to hop around as questions come up.
Well, we did an icebreaker for it, so you can go into it anytime, I guess.
There you go. All right. So so I think the first thing to cover, if you're very new to Mural, apologies for people that are Mural pros and live and breathe in here. I'm going to show some stuff that's not going to be new for you. But as facilitators, part of your role is also introducing other people into the technology. So we use the analogy that the interface in Mural, it's pan and zoom, and if you've ever used Google Maps, you've already experienced a similar interface. So what happens frequently is people don't understand this relationship. They think that what they see in the browser whenever they come in is the extent of what's going on. So sometimes they may enter the mural and they may be zoomed out, zoomed in really far, or zoomed out. And when they create a note, that little sticky note, that little white pixel right there is actually a fully legitimate, full-sized sticky note. But if you're zoomed out, it's very common for people to say, oh, I can't read that. And they make this gigantic thing. And in the virtual space, they've ended up creating this poster-sized sticky note that's too big. So we have some interfaces that allow you to kind of resize it back to a default size. So even if that happens, it happened frequently enough that we thought as a facilitator it might be handy to be able to marquee select a bunch of notes and just say knock them all to the standard size. So pan and zoom, if you have a mouse versus a trackpad, it's really helpful just to know about these zoom settings. Sometimes people also just transition on the fly. You can be logged into Mural from multiple devices. So as a facilitator, sometimes if I'm in a public workshop, maybe there's a large touchscreen display in the front, or maybe we're projecting the mural where everyone in an auditorium can see it. And I'll take an iPad and I'll be logged in both locations. And so as I kind of walk around, I can pan and zoom and actually drive what's happening from here. So as you move between devices, it's just helpful to know this stuff is here, whatever your preference is. So if you're in trackpad mode, the way you zoom is with pinching on your trackpad, as opposed to mouse mode, which is going to use the scrolling wheel, right? Down here in the lower corner, there's also this very helpful thing for facilitators. It's called the mini map. And you'll notice that as I zoom in, this little red rectangle changes shape. If we had 3 or 4 or 6 or 12 people in here, there would be different colored rectangles for each person. And as a facilitator, you could see if people are wandered off and they're in the wrong place, and you could summon them. So we have a way where you can just kind of click and say, summon everyone, and then they all kind of snap to look at what you're looking at. So pan and zoom navigation elements are pretty straightforward. Everything that you need to access in Mural as far as adding content is going to be handled through this side navigation bar. The first one deals with text elements. So titles and text boxes and comments. Titles are basically just larger type, and you drop it out and then add the title, whatever you want it to say. If you want to adjust the the size of it, you can scale it up and down. We have some limited fonts just to make things different or distinct from each other. Color, you have a basic color palette, and then you can create all your own custom colors. So if you're working in a theme where you need to introduce some unique colors, or you're working with someone that has a particular affinity for colors, or colors mean something in a system you're using, you can add them with hexadecimal value and all that kind of stuff. Text area is pretty much the same. Most of what your participants are going to be using, I'm guessing, are going to be the sticky notes. So there's a number of ways to add them. You can drag them in from the side and just begin typing. If you're in one sticky note and you want to take notes really rapidly, you can hit the tab key and it'll automatically create another one with the exact same style, color, everything. And you can take notes pretty quickly in this way. Any note, if you wanted to change it to another type, I meant that to be a 3x5. Well, you can do it, and then you can manipulate it however you'd like to. Change the color of it. It's very straightforward. The next set of items are the shapes and connectors. So this is going to be important as you think about setting up the space for people. So frequently I use shapes as simply a way for me to set and contain an area. So once you drop it in, you can tweak the tweak the line weights, make it bold, fill it with a color, so you can create these areas where people will be working. If you just need some structure, like we're going to work in this box first and then that box, etc. The other thing that's helpful to know is keyboard shortcut is if you're doing some type of mind mapping activity, that if you hold down the C key while you drag, you can create these connectors. By default, it's going to give you an arrow with a arrowhead that ends wherever you drag to. But you can change the direction of the arrowhead, or you can remove it entirely. But these, once the endpoints kind of sit on top of one of these items, they become sticky. So doing stakeholder maps or any type of diagrams, it becomes easy to kind of have the team inject this meaning as they're trying to talk about relationships between things, and then as the ideas expand and what have you, they stay connected. So these are things that you kind of play with, and then you think about your methods, and you go, okay, well, I could set up the method in this area, and maybe I'd pre-populate it with a couple colored Post-it notes based on the activity and what it needs, and then I'd have a couple ready to go, but people could also just add notes. If I click on a note and then I double click near it, I can basically inherit the properties of that note and make a new one that's like it. Similarly, if I wanted to make a new yellow note, I could do that. And if this happened to be a green note, then if I double click near here, it's just going to borrow those properties. So as a facilitator, and you're trying to prep these spaces, it's helpful to know. One of the things that helpful for facilitators, but also I find very helpful for the participants to understand, is that we've integrated with the Noun project. So every icon that you could possibly think of, if you were trying to come up with a unique way to kind of deal with, let's see, something like thrilled, so here are, for better or worse, here are a bunch of icons for that concept. Or if you're looking for, teamwork, these things are available to you. You just simply drag them out. You can scale them, and since they're kind of, we bring in the SVG version, they're scalable and they're colorable. So this becomes a way for people, as they're kind of thinking about ideas, to go find elements and bring them in without drawing. If people want to draw, we'll get to that in a second. There's a way to actually to do that as well. So anyway, searchable, there's a basic set here. I always like to point out that every time you open it, it kind of resets to a basic set. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, these are very helpful if you're setting up steps in an exercise. Drag them out, we don't need step 0. But if you had these steps that you wanted to to enumerate in a layout. You could scale them. We have layout tools, so you can, align top. You can change the color, distribute them horizontally if they're not spaced correctly. And now you have these ways to actually, visually indicate really boldly, first we're going to do this, second we'll do this, third we'll do this, etc. So those are just down at the bottom of that list. Also available to you are these frameworks, and these are kind of built-in elements that define the shape of some type of conversation. For example, we've all seen 2x2 grids, 3x3 grids, bullseye diagrams, these kind of things. So we have these basic ones. If you want to add them to your project, you simply drag them out. And the size of these are set up to be roughly, a decent size for any activity that you're going to do. If you want to make them bigger or smaller, you can. They have editable titles, so if you have the name of the, right, if you can just give it a title, and as notes are added to it, the nice thing is that it'll move around as kind of a component. In addition to these layouts, these basic layouts, we have other diagrams available. If you're familiar with Luma, we have some of their layouts. May or may not be activated in all workspaces, kind of depends. But we have ones for design. So you may find ones in here that are perfectly serviceable, but any of these you could quickly recreate with lines and icons from the Noun project. But thinking beyond the sprint, other applications, if you're working with agile teams, these are very simple frameworks you can drag out. Also, we have business model canvas, that kind of stuff, but also calendars. And I think this one might be really helpful when you think about when you're bringing these teams together and then you're trying to plan out next steps. You could set up as part of pre-work, give everyone a visual calendar where they can kind of indicate availability, or if you're planning multiple sessions, you can have one source of truth in a visual way to kind of map that out, or collaborate in real time with a team, and at the end of the session kind of have a state of whatever the one source of truth is. Image search, you can import stuff or do a search, web search. I think they integrate with Bing. So the last one here is a drawing mode. So right now I'm on a touchpad, so the drawing is as good as I can do with my finger. But I recently discovered this interesting little guy. I found him at my local pharmacy for I think $9. But if you look at it, it looks like a pen, but you hold it like this, and it's a mouse. So it has a little dongle. You plug it in the back. And so as you click a button and draw, it'll, if you do a lot of this stuff, it's much cheaper than a Wacom, big touch tablet or a dedicated tablet, and it works pretty well. If you want to do some really custom, if you're a sketcher and drawer like I am, and you want to add some personality, this actually becomes a really reasonable way to go about it.
Mark, there was a question before about using a mural on an iPad. Mm-hmm. And being able to kind of use an Apple Pencil in that application. Can it work with well, let me rephrase the question. Can you load up Mural in say a web browser on an iPad and be able to use an Apple Pencil to draw in the same interface?
Absolutely. You can actually do a little bit nicer than that. Is Mural has 2 native versions. So the one that we always demo is the one in the browser, because that's far and away the one that is most used. Also, the browser has the most overall functionality as far as the frameworks and all that stuff. The browser gets the good stuff first, and then it gets integrated. But we have an iOS version that works on an iPad. I have an iPad Pro with an Apple Pencil, and that sketching experience has improved tremendously, especially in the last couple of months. It's wonderful. I set my color palette up in a little bit because the default colors are a bit like primary. They're not as evocative or designy as I'd like, but you set up a custom palette and then you have different line widths, and it's very fast, very fluid. And then the other native version is for Windows 10, and it works brilliantly on a Surface, Surface Studio or Surface tablets.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, it's the pen. In fact, that's the one that I use mostly because the Apple Pen, I mean, I'm going to geek out on pens for a little bit, but the pencil for me has that hard plastic tip on glass, and it doesn't feel right, but to me. But the pen that comes with the Surface Pro is kind of this rubber carbon fiber thing, and it has a little bit of drag. And for me, that is part of the kinesthetics of actually sketching and drawing, is getting that slight feedback that doesn't feel like I'm, an elephant on a frozen lake, not knowing where I am. So.
Well, I have that elephant on frozen lake experience because my son uses that. So yeah, he's used to it, whereas I just think he's kind of like, gliding a pen across glass, like you're saying. So.
Yeah, it's and I know they have different replacement tips now, and you might some aftermarket ones, and I should probably explore that. But the other thing I like is if you're again facilitating, the show must go on. The Apple Pencils always die on me at the least opportune moments, and the only way you can charge it is to insert it into that special little adapter, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas the Windows Pen, it has this funky like quadruple A size, but you can carry 3 or 4 spares with you, and if it starts dying on you, you just pop the lid, put a new battery in, it sinks, and you're back in business. So.
Mark, real quick, one of the questions that someone asked was, do extensions like AdBlock and Ghostly bother the functioning of the website app?
Not to my knowledge. I'm gonna take any of these super specific questions. I'll take and somehow, Robert, I'll make answers available so you can distribute it to the team. But to my knowledge, I run Disconnect and a couple ad blocking software. In fact, in my home, I'm running through 2 routers. One's Rocos and one is Griffin. And so I'm running, Rocos does the it blocks by country, right? IP ranges by country. So that's hardcore, firewall stuff. But then the Griffin is just kind of family device management stuff. And so Mural has no problem translating through that stuff. It's been my experience.
Okay. Continue, please. I just wanted to interject that one question.
Oh, sure, no problem. Also, Jim and I at Mural, if we're doing something like this session today, I don't rely on Wi-Fi. And this is kind of a limitation of my house and my distance where my office is. So I have a big Cat 6 cable that I uncoil and make sure that I've got a really solid line, just to give VoIP and everything every possible advantage. And even still, I can tell sometimes the camera is doing a little buffering. So anyway, just thought I'd share that.
No, that's fine. Being somebody who used to do LAN parties in my 20s, I know all about Cat 5 cables.
That's right. That's right. I miss those days. I miss those days of everyone lugging their PCs into one spot
and how much equipment you could balance on like a chair with wheels, getting it through several doors.
That's right.
Because the last thing you want is for something to go bad, having to do a reinstall while everybody else is around you is playing games. But I digress.
That's right. That's right.
There's always that one person.
That's right. You and I will schedule some time and geek out on.
Yes, we can reminisce.
That's right. Well, let me move into the next little chunk then. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, so we've talked about kind of the mental mindset. You've seen a little bit about how Mural works. There were some advanced things that I should probably mention. The timer we hit, the fact that you have a facilitator role. There's a way to do a voting session where you can give everyone a certain number of votes. If you want just one top vote, give everyone one vote, and then you can actually name it because you can run multiple voting sessions. Let's go this one, best winner. And you start it, and then everyone will get a screen that pops up. So even if they've never used Mural, they will get a little instruction on, for their specific platform, what it means to add a vote or remove a vote. And then the thing that I want to mention is, if you're thinking about voting, the votes happen on individual items, right? Individual note cards. So if I click, you'll see that my one vote gets associated with this one. And once I voted, it's stuck there unless I hold Shift and then click again. I can get it back, and I can choose to vote on, on a different item. I make this point because sometimes you have a method where you're doing something like affinitizing a bunch of items together, and then that cluster without a single title note that you add or have the people indicate, and people go to vote, and you give everyone 5 votes, and people like this theme, but they all vote on different notes within that theme. That's not going to help the results roll up in a useful way for you. And here I'll show you what happens. As a facilitator or whoever initiates the voting session, you also get a status of how many people have voted, and you'll get a list here. So if we had 13 people in here, you'd see who hasn't voted yet. So you could, go there and go, Robert, I noticed you haven't, or you get stuck, I see you haven't voted yet, So you have a way to kind of get a sense of where to keep facilitating or offering assistance. And so when we want to end the voting session, then the results are displayed. And so here, this is pretty simple. There's only one person here, one person voting, but you get a sense of how many votes, unique votes. So if you do this thing where you're trying to get really try and look at the data and understand people's indicated preferences and things, there's some richness there. When you close this down, the voting sessions will kind of stay across this top area, so you can always go back and look at the results again if you want to. The last thing that I'll mention here in kind of the advanced features is outlining. And outlining allows you to leverage this thing that's tucked in over here, the outline view. So right now, you'll notice that I added this framework. Well, the framework was automatically added to this outline. And if I click on the item in the outline, then my view will kind of zoom into that particular step. The reason why I call this out is that as you're setting up, as you're setting up things like, for example, all of these items that were part of my intro at the very beginning of the call, I can group these together, and then I should be able to add this. Oh, I might only be able to add individual items. So what I might do is drop in a shape, like so, and wrap it around. Oh, my trackpad battery is getting sketchy. Bear with me a second. So just as an example, so I could drop this shape. I can make it invisible, turn the line off, but I could add this to the outline and then give it a title like welcome. And then I can also change the order, because we should say welcome before we go into something else. But now, as a facilitator, if you're trying to guide people through the activities, you have a way to kind of zoom the screen to exactly what you want to show. So this is also helpful in terms of giving people a way to understand, if you have step 1, step 2, step 3, setting up some type of border shape like this, putting it in the background and locking it, but giving it a name. You can build this outline, and it allows individuals to not only you as a presenter to do kind of like a Prezi type thing without making people nauseous because it's spinning and twisting. If you've ever seen Prezi, I used to love it, and now I haven't used it in a long time for that reason. I didn't know I was making people nauseous, until you get to the end of your presentation. But this allows you to kind of set the stage and have these areas and then quickly navigate through to do a presentation, but also to tell people, open the outline view and, click on step 8. That's where we are now. So it gives them a way to kind of hop around. Okay. So I think that's kind of the nuts and bolts about the mural. Is in terms of sprinting, I wanted to kind of highlight the way we have come to discover a best practice, where in Mural, and Robert, I know we've set you up with some spaces. People may be setting up their own spaces. I'm just going to assume that if people are interested in Mural, then they're pursuing, a 30-day trial, or maybe they're working something out with you to be able to set these things up, or you've set them up for them. But if within Mural you have a room, and a room contains murals, you can share a room with people, or you can share individual murals with people. But what we do with our workshops is we typically build a room custom for that workshop. And if it's like a 2-day sprint in 1 week, I might do a room for that week's work and put the 2 murals in there, and then maybe keep adding to that room as we go, as we have our next bit. But if I had different clients, for example, or if I was participating in 2 different sprints, I would want them in different rooms. I'd want a room set up for each one. And then in there, we make sure that we set up some type of pre-work mural. So, and we have several examples and templates, and I can share with anyone that's interested. Robert, just let me know. But
I'll tell you right now, I definitely want to, because the one I'm using, I think, is a little older. And if you have some other variations, I'd love to have them in hand, especially as teams come online in a couple weeks.
You bet. No, most of the ones that we have the pre-work is pretty much get to know you. It's a little icebreaker thing where people can upload a picture, talk about their favorite dessert or their favorite vacation spot, share a little bit about themselves, and it's all done asynchronously. So, in the week before or the 2 weeks before, however much in advance you want to go, you share this link and you let people kind of come in and add, fill out their little bit. But it also gives you an opportunity, as you see kind of down here at the bottom, to put in links. So that I'll share this template with you, and they're links to answer basic mural questions, right? So just like you're joining this session to wrap your head around what this is going to be like for you, this is meant to offload some of the work and help people that are new to Mural kind of get a quick video overview. What's this about? Okay, it's 2-minute, real short 2-minute thing that talk about adding content, sharing murals, how to group things, how to navigate, all that stuff. So it's an opportunity to kind of offload some of that time you might have to burn at the beginning of your together time, and let them kind of maybe come in with a couple questions, but queue that up. This is also an opportunity, if there's things specific to the challenge, post it here. Links to articles, things that you're expecting people to read before we show up and start this together collaboration. There's probably some stuff that you don't want to just have people sitting around silently reading for half an hour, all the stuff. Give it to them in advance. Flipped classroom approach, which is now, boy, I wish I was back in school now, because totally different from listening to hours and hours of boring lectures.
or the noticing, being more interested in the clothing that people are wearing when they're presenting and how old it is, rather than what the material is.
That's right. When the professor walks in with a stack of paper and blows all the dust off to the side before he starts reading, you're like, oh boy, this is sure cutting edge.
And then they don't talk to you, they just look at the papers.
That's right. There
was a question
please.
about, go ahead, go for it.
No, go ahead. What was the question?
It was just really quick. I think I know the answer to this. It was Priscilla was asking about inserting video, and I think it's just a matter of having the URL at hand, and you copy and paste into the mural board, and it actually produces a preview as well as a description of the video I'm hearing.
Absolutely. So, for example, I'll hop over to YouTube, um, and here's this guy Bob. Love Bob. Bob likes to make stuff, and Bob builds all sorts of wacky, cool stuff. And unfortunately, it's riddled with ads. But if you copy that URL and then come back here and I just hit paste, it builds a little rich snippet for me. Boom. So I get kind of a thumbnail of the thing, and this is all editable. If I, just want to say, watch this. So yes, anything that you drop in here, links. If you drop in links to blog articles, we give you a little rich snippet as well. So this is a great way to even when you're doing research, if I'm asked to give a talk or something, I do all my thinking in Mural, and I start paying attention on LinkedIn and Medium and all these different things that are relevant topics. I just copy the URLs and build myself a reading list, and then do affinitizing with the links of the things. So I actually affinitize all the media that's out there and understand conceptually where I might be able to pull support material for different points. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my strategy as well going into this for the next couple of weeks, is being able to build something like this. So depending on the challenge, or even like the use of different applications related to virtual engagement and collaboration, there was going to be basically that litany list of different videos, as well as like the Mural Pro videos, the stuff that Amelia sent me before on YouTube, and kind of bringing all that together so that it's all stuff that people can look at offline and kind of get acclimated to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so helpful, and it allows when new teams come together. One of the warm up exercises that I often do is just ask people, share your recent reading list. Share 2 articles that you read recently that you thought are really cool. And that becomes a really interesting, eye-opening way where you have people like, me, I might throw in some of these, nutty, how to make a 3D printed soap dispenser that squirts soap out of a human nose, kind of, something wacky, but you get these, it's someone else that's way into, quantum neural networks or something. And it's just, it gives you something to talk about, over a virtual beer or coffee afterwards, So
I feared that was where the soap was coming from. I didn't want to kind of go elsewhere, but yeah, it's
I'm looking at, yeah. One of the coolest things that he built was he took a regular Nerf gun and he amped it up so it could shoot 1,000 Nerf darts. It's a little absurd, but anyway. Oh, the Christmas tree cannon. So he had this thing shaped like a candy cane that basically forced air exploded ornaments and decorated his tree in about half a second. It was
wow.
Yeah, too much time on their hands.
Yeah.
All right, so here I'll just share an example. Keep going here. I know we're right up against the hour, but if people are interested, I can show a couple examples of a design sprint, what it looked like that we did recently with Moleskin. I just want to make sure, unless there are any burning questions, I kind of just talked through the whole thing.
I think you're good. You can go ahead.
Okay, so what I'm going to show are the examples for this sprint that some of the designers, including myself, and some of the marketing and design folks from Moleskin, they have a smart writing system. And so we did a design sprint to look at how we could bridge the analog and digital world. We built the following murals, and I'll actually show you the full-size ones. So to begin with, we had a PreWork mural. And so here you see we're bringing together 2 teams. The Moleskin folks don't know everything about Mural as far as marketing and positioning and stuff, and the Mural folks are just coming up to speed on Moleskin. So right away, there's some Moleskin. Here are the links to all the apps. Okay, so we get hooked up with that. Then we get inspired with some of the videos and things that show the cool systems and what you can do. And then we share links to each other's kind of existing research, right? So the personas and things from Moleskin side and Mural side. So right away, huge value. down below, there was a little exercise where people drop in a photo of themselves, and then the instruction was to sketch what you see outside your window. So everyone kind of used different things. And by the way, this thing I did, it's right out there behind me, but this is using the pen on Windows 10. So as you can see, yeah, very cool. I mean, this was very fun to do, very immediate way to work. And then top takeaways from the research material, right? So you're prompting people to actually go look at it, but then in the moment when it's still fresh in their head, to be mindful and record some things that are important to them. And this helps kickstart the conversation and help people context switch. When they come into the session, I can go back over my notes and say, oh, right, yeah, I thought this and this and this and this was very interesting. The other part of this mural also introduces personas. So for the design sprint, it gives people a little bit of a preview about the challenge. This was a 2 4-hour days. It was an extremely compressed sprint, but it kind of breaks it down, and then it introduces the personas that we'd be working with. Day of, we created a mural that we call the presentation mural. And this is the mural that we don't invite people in. This is not where people are going to be doing the work necessarily. This is where we do our presentation. We share the agenda. We set up the guidelines, behavioral norms, this kind of stuff, and then kind of work through the topics. We do some demos and stuff in here. We bring in some of the pre-work and affinitize it and stuff. But we're kind of facilitating in this space. And then after that initial like 20-minute discussion, then we actually go into this middle section. So we kind of laid it out like a board game that works from left to right. And here you see, here are the two teams. And then this is where we'd use Zoom's breakout rooms. And each team would go into a separate mural via a link. And this is where the instructions and guidance walks them through the activities that they need to complete in this breakout. In this case, we have some links to examples of low fidelity prototyping, because the goal was day one, we kind of abstraction ladder, question the question, arrive at a challenge statement or statement starter, and then we do kind of rapid idea iteration, noodle on that, pick one to advance, and then by the end of the first session, we've got a rough storyboard of what we want, and then in the second day, we built the storyboard and brought in users, conducted testings, and then gathered notes from the user testing. So thinking it, just break it down into where do you want people to do the work? And then as a facilitator, what do you need to actually set the stage and help, and what do you need to show and demonstrate, and then a place for them to work. The thing is also, if you have multiple breakout groups, giving everyone their own mural allows people to use the timer, because the timer's by mural. So if you just divided the thing in half and had some people working on the left and some people working on the right, and someone used the timer would be for everyone. If you wanted to run a voting session, it is going to be for everyone that's in the mural. So that's another reason to kind of break it out and have different murals. And I think that's pretty much the end of what I had. Other than I'll give some links for you to to distribute to everyone. But I think really, especially with what you're doing, Robert, this becomes truer and truer every time I have an opportunity to do a virtual sprint, that they're not a burden. They're actually an opportunity to do things in a completely new way, to bring real diversity into a conversation. And I think it's only going to become more and more a way that things get done.
I'm 100% of that opinion. I also think that virtual is going to be the future with this. It's just only going to be a matter of time before the gap in understanding and the skill set that's required to kind of do this, and the discipline just naturally falls into place to the point where it's going to become a facet of somebody's work engagement.
Exactly. exactly.
So we're over time a little bit, but if we have any questions that you want to ask Mark in the next, Mark, can you hang out for another like 5, 10 possibly, or do you have
Yeah,
to?
you bet.
Okay.
Yep. I'm open. I'm good to go for at least another 15.
Okay. So you heard the man. He's got some time. If you want to ask some questions, don't miss your opportunity. Don't listen to a recording afterwards and wish you had the chance. That's why we say something. And hey, if you're so if you're, and then again, if you're totally satisfied with what you've seen and heard today, then we're set and we can break. So I definitely do want to get some links to those murals. I mean, it may be a matter of just sharing them within the application itself. I think one question I can lead with is you kind of touched on this in the presentation that you did, where if someone is a facilitator and bringing people into Mural, there was the question of whether or not they would be a full-fledged member or a guest. And I think I know the answer to that in the sense that guests are really for enterprise level licenses for Mural, but you
Right.
can still bring people in, and within those 30 days, as long as they either purchase their own license or you basically just keep them on for a month, I think you're in a safe zone.
Yeah, I think that's the way it works. They're continually fiddling with that, and but I think the idea is if you have a 30-day trial, it's a fully fledged 30-day invite whoever you want trial. You just want to make sure that if it's something you're like, okay, this is going to become part of my practice, and you want to go through and kind of weed out anyone that you brought in for this design sprint that you're not still working with, because full-fledged members, are you're paying whatever it is, $12 a month or something for those seats. So you want to make sure you're not floating someone else in there.
Yeah, especially if it's just a 1 week engagement like what we're doing with this event.
Exactly. Also, if you're in an educational situation, student or teacher or something, there is a free for education model. I think we forget to remind people about that, but especially students or people that are working in nonprofits and educational space and stuff. There's lots of flexibility because we really, we'd much rather people have the ability to do good work and make an impact, and of course learn the tool. But enterprise is, it comes with all the nitty gritty security you need for, the EU and everything, and banks use this, and Department of Defense uses this and stuff. So with that comes kind of some expectations around the way data is handling that, it's a enterprise level tool. So it comes with a little bit of a price there.
Yeah, I'm looking back at the group chat, there was a question about Windows 10 Surface. They wanted to know about the downloadable, installable version. Do they need admin rights to do that? They're asking because of the security settings of their company.
Yeah, so it's delivered through the Windows App Store. In the past, there have been certain unique situations where there is a side loadable thing. I don't like people to kind of think that's the way to do it. There's lots of issues around that. It's not updatable. It's coming out of it's not, we hesitate doing it because it's not a premium experience, because if there was some exploitable problem in there, there'd be no way for us to update it. And then you've got this version out there that we're not able to kind of keep you safe. So it's kind of, but in internal testing or unique things, I would just say reach out to Mural, and we're all ears when it comes to unique situations and people that are trying to get something done, and we bend over backwards to try and get it to work however you need it to work. But most of the time you got to go through the Windows store so that there's the ability for you to kind of stay patched and update. And you'll want the new features. I mean, they're rolling cool stuff into this all the time, and that won't happen either if you do a side load.
Okay.